My daughter, my only child, the little girl I once held in my arms, looked me right in the eye and asked me when I was planning to die so she could finally have her inheritance. Hi everyone, I'm Grandma Beatrice. My name is Beatrice Miller. I'm 81 years old, and I'm speaking to you from my little house in southern Maine. The story I'm about to tell you, gosh, it's a hard one. It's a story I have kept locked in this old heart of mine for the past 5 years. It's a promise I made to my late husband, Frank, a promise I thought would protect our daughter. But in the end, it only revealed a truth so ugly it nearly shattered my soul. My neighbors, my friends, even my own sister, they don't know this story. They know my daughter doesn't visit anymore. They think we had a simple falling out. They don't know the words she said to me. They don't know the greed that had poisoned her heart. There's a particular kind of shame, you know, when your own child hurts you in a way no stranger ever could. It's a shame that makes you want to hide, to cover up their cruelty with excuses because their actions feel like a reflection of your own failure as a parent. For years, I hid. I made excuses. I told people she was just busy or stressed. But I'm too old for lies now. The truth, no matter how painful, deserves to see the light of day. I'm telling this now because I need to. I need to let go of the secret and the pain that came with it. And I'm telling it for anyone else out there who has ever felt valued only for what they could give, and not for who they are. Before I begin, if you feel you have it in your heart, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support, your kindness, it's like a little candle in a dark room. It gives an old woman like me the courage to finally speak the words I was too ashamed to even whisper for so long. Thank you, my dears. Your compassion means more than you will ever know. My story, the happy part of it, began in the year 1965. That's when I married my Frank. Oh, he was such a good man. He wasn't rich or famous. He was a carpenter, a master craftsman. He could make wood sing. Our little house, this very house I'm sitting in now, he built it with his own 2 hands. I can still remember the smell of sawdust and fresh paint, the sound of his happy whistling as he worked. We didn't have much, not in the way the world counts riches. We drove old cars, we wore clothes until they were threadbare, and our vacations were camping trips up by the lake. But our life was full. It was full of the smell of the apple pies I baked, the warmth of the fire Frank would build in the hearth on cold winter nights, and the sound of laughter. My goodness, our little house was always filled with so much laughter. And the greatest source of that laughter was our daughter, Amanda. Oh, she was my sunshine girl. From the moment she was born, she had me wrapped around her little finger. She had Frank's kind eyes and my stubborn chin. I remember spending hours in the garden with her, her little hands covered in dirt as she tried to help me plant daisies. I remember kissing her scraped knees and reading her bedtime stories every single night. Frank adored her. He built her the most beautiful dollhouse you've ever seen, a perfect miniature of our own home, complete with tiny wooden furniture he carved himself. Our world, our entire universe, revolved around her. We thought she was perfect. We worked so hard to give her everything we never had. Not just things, but opportunities. We saved every spare penny, not for ourselves, but for her education. Frank would take on extra jobs, working late into the night, his hands aching, just so we could put a little more into her college fund. And it paid off. She was smart, our Amanda. She was the first person in either of our families to go to a 4-year university. We were so proud my heart felt like it would burst. And that's where things began to change. It was so slow at first, I didn't even see it happening. At college, she met a young man named Tom. He came from a family with money. Real money. The first time she brought him home, I remember feeling a little intimidated. He was handsome and charming, but there was a coolness in his eyes. When he shook Frank's hand, I saw his gaze sweep over our simple living room, our mended furniture, our old television set. It wasn't a look of judgment, not exactly. It was a look of appraisal, like he was calculating our net worth and finding it lacking. Amanda started changing after she met him. She became a little more concerned with brand names, with appearances. She'd gently suggest we should update the kitchen, or that maybe it was time for Dad to buy a newer car. Frank and we just laughed it off. We were so happy she'd found someone she loved. We were blind to the seeds of discontent that were being planted in her heart. Now, I have to tell you the other secret. My husband, Frank, the simple carpenter, he was also a very, very wise man. Back in the early 1980s, his younger brother, who was always chasing get-rich-quick schemes, begged Frank to invest in a tiny brand-new computer company he'd heard about. Frank thought it was nonsense. But to help his brother out, he took a few $1,000s, a huge sum for us back then, and he bought the stock, thinking he was just throwing the money away. The company was called Apple. For years, we forgot about it. Then one day, Frank came home from the bank, his face pale. He sat me down at this very table and showed me a piece of paper. The number on it, it was staggering. It was more money than we could ever dream of. We were secretly millionaires. I wanted to tell Amanda immediately. I imagined her joy, her relief. But Frank said no. He was quiet for a long time, and then he said something I will never forget. "Bea," he said, taking my hands in his. "Character is built when you have to work for things. It's built in the struggle, not in the reward. I want Amanda to have a good life, but I want her to build it herself. This money, it can be a blessing or it can be a curse. We'll keep it as a safety net, a secret, for a real emergency or for her, after we're both gone. Until then, our greatest inheritance to her is the values we taught her. Until then, our greatest inheritance to her is the..." So we kept the secret. We lived our simple life, and we put our faith in the daughter we had raised. We believed, with all our hearts, that her character was strong enough, that her love for us was more powerful than any amount of money. We were wrong. The day we buried Frank, the world lost some of its color. It was a crisp autumn day, but I felt none of the season's beauty. I just felt a profound, soul-deep chill. Amanda and her husband, Tom, stood beside me at the graveside. She cried, and I know her tears were real. She loved her father, in her way. But even in her grief, there was a strange, unsettling practicality. On the car ride home, while I was staring out the window, lost in a fog of 60 years of memories, she was on her phone, talking in a hushed but businesslike tone. "Cancel the caterer for Dad's party," I heard her whisper. "No, there's no point rescheduling." It was the first little sign, a tiny crack in the foundation of the daughter I thought I knew. I told myself it was just her way of coping, of taking control in a situation that felt so out of control. I was wrong. It was her way of clearing the decks. The change, it didn't happen overnight. It was a slow poisoning, a gradual escalation of requests and expectations that, little by little, began to feel less like a daughter seeking help and more like a creditor demanding payment. It all started about a year after Frank passed. They had bought a house, a massive, brand-new colonial in a fancy suburb an hour away. It was far too big for them and their one son, my grandson Leo, but it had what Tom called curb appeal. It was a house designed to impress. I remember the first time I visited. Amanda gave me the grand tour, pointing out the granite countertops, the 3-car garage, the cavernous master bathroom that was bigger than my entire kitchen. "It's beautiful, honey," I said, my voice a little breathless. "But my goodness, it must have cost a fortune." She waved a dismissive hand, a gesture I would come to see a lot. "Oh, we got a great deal," she said, though her eyes didn't meet mine. "But things will be a little tight for a while. You know how it is." I didn't know how it was, not really. But a few weeks later, she called. After a few minutes of polite small talk, she got to the point. "Mom," she said, her voice taking on a casual, almost offhand tone. "I was just looking at the budget and, gosh, this mortgage is a killer. I was wondering, since you're all alone in the house now, and your expenses must be so much lower without Dad, if maybe you could help us out a little? Just for a few months, until Tom gets his end-of-year bonus." Meager. My heart, It ached with love and pity for her. My poor girl, struggling to keep up. Of course, I said yes. Frank and I had our pensions, a small but steady income. We had our secret, of course, that giant sleeping dragon of a fortune, but Frank's words echoed in my head. For a real emergency. A big mortgage didn't feel like a real emergency. It felt like a choice they had made. But helping my daughter, that felt like my duty. So I started sending her a check every month. $500. It was a significant chunk of my own modest income, but it felt good to help. It made me feel needed. Useful. But the few months stretched into a year. The end-of-year bonus Tom received went to a luxury SUV, not the mortgage. And soon, the requests became more frequent and more specific. "Mom, it's me," she'd say, not even bothering with a hello. "Listen, the property tax bill just came. It's insane. There's no way we can swing it this month. Can you cover it?" It wasn't a question. It was an expectation. So I'd go to the bank and send a wire transfer. Then it was the tuition for my grandson Leo's private school. "We want him to have the best, Mom. You understand that, don't you?" Of course I understood. I paid it. Then it was a new furnace. Then a family vacation to the Caribbean. "The stress is just killing us, Mom. We need to get away." I paid for their plane tickets, picturing them on a beach while I stayed home, eating soup to make my own budget stretch. With every check I wrote, the dynamic between us shifted. I was no longer just her mother. I was her benefactor, her personal ATM. And our conversations reflected it. They became purely transactional. She would call, state the need, and I would agree to pay. The calls never started with, "How are you feeling?" They were about numbers, bills, and due dates. My life, my loneliness, my grief for her father. It was all irrelevant. An inconvenient detail in the background of her financial needs. The cruelty of it, the part that still twists a knife in my heart, was how they began to treat my own life as a source of potential income. My husband, my Frank, had been a master carpenter. His workshop in the garage was a treasure trove of antique tools, beautiful handmade pieces of furniture he never sold, and rare, exotic hardwoods he'd collected over a lifetime. It was his sanctuary. It was sacred ground to me. One Sunday, Amanda and Tom came to visit. It was a rare occasion, and my heart leaped with hope. But they didn't want to see me. They wanted to see the workshop. Tom walked through it, his eyes alight with a disturbing, predatory gleam. He picked up Frank's antique hand planes, turning them over in his hands. "You know, Beatrice," he said, calling me by my first name, as if we were business partners. "There's a lot of money in here. These vintage tools, they're very collectible. That pile of Brazilian rosewood over there? That's worth a fortune. You should really think about liquidating all this. It's just sitting here, gathering dust." Amanda nodded in agreement, her eyes scanning the shelves. "He's right, Mom. It's a waste. Think of what this could do for Leo's college fund. Dad would have wanted that." I felt frozen with a rage so cold, it felt like ice in my veins. Liquidating? Selling off pieces of her father's soul, his life's passion, to pay for their granite countertops and Caribbean vacations? Using his memory as a justification for their greed. "No," I said, and my voice was sharp, a sound they hadn't heard from me before. "Absolutely not. This was your father's. It stays here." "Nay, and I did you." The look on Amanda's face was one of pure, petulant frustration. It was the look of a child being denied a toy she felt she was entitled to. She didn't see a sacred space. She saw a warehouse of uncashed checks. After that day, the visits became even rarer. My refusal to sell her father's legacy had marked me as uncooperative. Difficult. The breaking point, the moment the mask of civility finally dropped completely and revealed the ugly, grasping monster underneath, happened 2 years ago. My teacher's pension, the one I had been using to fund their lifestyle, was unexpectedly cut due to state budget shortfalls. It was a significant reduction. It meant I could no longer afford to send Amanda her $500 check each month, let alone pay for their property taxes and private school tuition. I called her to tell her, my stomach in knots. I was terrified of her reaction. I explained the situation, my voice trembling with a mixture of my own financial anxiety and my fear of her disappointment. There was a long, cold silence on the other end of the line. "What do you mean you can't pay it?" she finally said, her voice completely devoid of any sympathy for my situation. It was flat, hard, accusatory. "I mean the money isn't there anymore, honey," I explained, my own voice pleading. "My pension has been cut by nearly 40%. I need what's left for my own bills, for food." "For a foodie?" she scoffed, and the sound was so filled with derision, it felt like a physical blow. "So what are we supposed to do? We're counting on that money. The mortgage payment is due next week. Are you seriously telling me you're going to let our house go into foreclosure because you need to buy foodie?" I was speechless. The cruelty of the question, the sheer, breathtaking selfishness of it, left me gasping. "Amanda," I whispered, my heart hammering against my ribs. I can't give you money I don't have. We could sell the new SUV maybe. Or you could move to a smaller, more affordable house." "Sell my car," she shrieked, her voice rising to a hysterical pitch. "Move. Are you insane? My life is here. My son's school, our friends. You want me to uproot my entire life because your little pension got cut? After everything we've done for you." "Everything you've done for me?" I asked, my own voice rising in disbelief. "Yes," she shouted, completely unhinged now. "We visit you. We call you. We let you be a part of your grandson's life. We have been carrying you for years. And it was a version of reality so warped, so completely divorced from the truth, that I felt dizzy. And then came the words that have been burned into my memory, the words that I will hear on my deathbed. She took a deep, shuddering breath, and her voice dropped to a low, venomous, and chillingly calm tone. "You know what, Mom? Dad was the one who held this family together. Since he's been gone, you've been nothing but a drain, a black hole of need. To be honest, I wish it had been you who died first. It would have been so much easier. At least then, we would have had the inheritance. So why don't you just die already and do the one useful thing you have left to do?" In the end, the line went dead. I stood in my silent kitchen, the phone still pressed to my ear. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. The world had tilted on its axis. My daughter. My sunshine girl. The baby I had nursed. The child whose scraped knees I had kissed. She had just wished me dead so she could cash in my life. In that moment, something inside me didn't just break. It shattered. It was obliterated. The soft, loving heart of a doting mother was vaporized, and in its place, a void. A cold, quiet, empty space. Frank's words came back to me then, not as a gentle memory, but as a prophecy fulfilled. This money, it can be a blessing, or it can be a curse. He had been wrong about one thing. It wasn't an emergency my daughter was facing. It was a test of character. A test she had just failed in the most catastrophic way imaginable. And I, the guardian of his legacy, his secret, his fortress. I now knew exactly what I had to do. The curse he had feared had come to pass. And there was only one way to break it. For a long time after she hung up, I didn't move. I think in that moment, my heart actually stopped beating. The world went silent. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, the hum of the refrigerator, the chirping of the birds outside my window, it all just ceased. My daughter's words echoed in that profound silence, bouncing off the walls of my mind. "Why don't you just die already?" It wasn't just the cruelty that broke me. It was the honesty. In that one horrific sentence, she had finally told me the truth. She had revealed my true value to her. I wasn't her mother. I was a life insurance policy she was impatient to cash in. I was an obstacle sitting between her and a sum of money. My life, my breath, my beating heart was an inconvenience to her financial planning. I don't know how long I stood there. An hour? 2? I felt the sun move across the floor, the afternoon shadows growing long. The initial shock, that feeling of being completely obliterated, slowly, very slowly, began to recede. And in the void it left behind, something else began to form. It wasn't anger. Anger is a hot emotion, a fire. This was the opposite. This was ice. A cold, hard, and terrifyingly clear resolve began to crystallize in the ruins of my heart. The love I had for my daughter, a love that had defined my entire adult life, had been my son. Now, the sun had been extinguished, and in the absolute Arctic cold, I could finally see everything with perfect, unshakable clarity. Frank's test was over. The results were in. My daughter had shown me the man he had feared she would become. Her heart wasn't just poisoned by greed. It had been entirely consumed by it. In that moment, something inside me didn't just break. It shifted. The soft, pliable, forgiving nature of a mother hardened into something else. Something purposeful. Something that felt, for the first time, like justice. I walked, my movements stiff and robotic, into the spare bedroom, the room that had once been Amanda's. I knelt down, my old knees protesting, and pulled the loose floorboard from under the rug, the place Frank had shown me all those years ago. Inside was a dusty, metal box. I lifted it out. It was heavy, not just with paper, but with the weight of our entire secret life. I placed it on the kitchen table, and I opened it. Inside, neatly bundled, were the original stock certificates for Apple Computer Inc. And beside them, a business card. It belonged to the firm of Albright and Chen, and a handwritten note from Frank Detaille. It was short and to the point. Beatrice, it read. If you are reading this, it means there is a true emergency. Mr. Albright knows what to do. Trust him. I love you. A true emergency. This was it. Not a financial emergency, but a moral one. A spiritual one. The next morning I woke up with a purpose I hadn't felt since Frank died. I did not cry. The tears had frozen solid inside me. I made my coffee, I got dressed, and I sat at my kitchen table with the metal box. I picked up the phone and dialed the number on the card. A kind, professional voice answered. Albright and Chen, how can I help you? My own voice, when I spoke, was steady. It was the voice of a stranger I didn't recognize. Hello, I said. My name is Beatrice Miller. I am calling regarding the portfolio of my late husband, Franklin Miller. I believe you've been expecting my call. There was a respectful pause on the other end of the line. Then, the voice warmed. Mrs. Miller, yes, of course. Frank was a wonderful man, and one of our firm's most brilliant pioneer investors. We are so sorry for your loss. He left very clear, very specific instructions. The entire portfolio is now under your sole control. It is quite substantial. Please, tell me, what is it you would like to do? What did I want to do? The question hung in the air. A week ago, I would have said, how can I help my daughter? But her voice, her wish for my death, had severed that cord forever. The answer now was simple. It was righteous. It was the only thing left to do, to honor the man Frank had been and the values he had tried to pass on. Mr. Albright, I said, my voice as clear and cold as a winter morning. I want you to begin the process of total liquidation. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Total liquidation? Mrs. Miller, we're talking about a portfolio worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The tax implications alone are enormous. Are you certain? I have never been more certain of anything in my life, I said. What? Sell everything, as quickly as you can, and then I want you to help me give it all away. That was my first act of defiance. Not an act of revenge. An act of purification. I was going to take this money, this thing that had corrupted my daughter's soul, this cursed treasure, and I was going to turn it back into a blessing. Just not for her. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Mr. Albright flew to Maine to meet with me in person. He was a kind, silver-haired man with gentle eyes who looked at me not with pity, but with a profound respect. I told him everything, the whole ugly, heartbreaking story. When I was done, there were tears in his eyes. "Your husband was a wise man, Mrs. Miller," he said softly. "And you are a strong woman. We will do exactly as you wish." And we did. We spent weeks creating a plan. It wasn't about punishment. I didn't want to buy her mortgage or foreclose on her house. That felt too personal, too engaging. It would have kept me tied to her in a battle of wills. My goal was not to engage. It was to disconnect, to sever the final tie, the one made of money, completely and irrevocably. My plan was simpler, and in its own way, far more devastating. With Mr. Albright's help, I identified the charities that had meant the most to Frank and me. The local animal shelter where we'd found our beloved dog years ago. The children's hospital that had saved a neighbor's little boy. The carpentry guild that Frank had been a member of to fund scholarships for young woodworkers. And finally, a large National Alzheimer's Research Foundation in honor of my own mother. Mr. Albright's legal team worked with breathtaking efficiency. They set up a series of irrevocable charitable trusts. They arranged for massive, anonymous donation. Piece by piece, the fortune that had been a silent giant in our lives was dismantled, broken down, and sent out into the world to do good. With every signature, I felt lighter. I felt cleaner. I was taking this cursed money and laundering it with good deeds. While this was happening, my phone was a constant buzzing source of vitriol. Amanda called. She screamed. She cried. She threatened. She begged. She sent long, rambling text messages, first filled with rage, then with cloying, false sentimentality. "How could you do this to us? After all we've been through? The house is going into foreclosure, Mom. Foreclosure. Are you happy now?" Me. Then, a day later, "Mom, I didn't mean what I said. I was just stressed. You know I love you. Please just call me. We can fix this. I know you have some savings tucked away. Just help us one last time." I never answered. I never responded. I blocked her number. Her words could no longer reach me. There was nothing left to say. The final step of my fight back was the quietest and the most final. 2 months after our last terrible conversation, after the last of the money had been transferred and the secret fortune was gone, I sat down at my kitchen table. I took out a single piece of plain, simple stationery. I wrote a short, simple letter. "Dear Amanda, I have received your messages. I want you to know that I have taken your advice. I have finally done the one useful thing I had left to do. The inheritance you were so worried about, the money you were waiting for me to die for, it's gone. I have given every last penny of it to charity. There is nothing left. Your father and I spent our lives trying to teach you that love is more valuable than money. I'm so sorry that was a lesson you were never able to learn. I will not be seeing you or speaking to you again. I wish you well in the life you have chosen. Goodbye, Beatrice." Then, I sealed it in a plain white envelope. I put a single stamp on it, and I placed it in my mailbox. As the mailman took it away, I felt a profound sense of peace. It was the end, the final word. I had not destroyed her. I had simply removed myself, and the fortune she so coveted from her life forever. I had given her exactly what she wanted, a life without me in it. Now, she would get to see what that life was really worth. After I sent that letter, a great quiet settled over my life. The angry, buzzing phone fell silent. There were no more vitriolic text messages, no more desperate, demanding voicemails. It was as if a long, terrible storm had finally passed, leaving behind a clean, quiet, and strangely peaceful landscape. I didn't hear from her directly again. But in a small town, news has a way of traveling. A few months later, my old neighbor, Mary, called for our weekly chat. After talking about her garden and her grandchildren, she hesitated. Then her voice dropped to a sympathetic whisper. "Oh, Beatrice, I heard the news about Amanda and Tom," she said gently. "It's just terrible. Their house, the bank took it. They had to move into a little rental apartment across town daddying. Tom had to sell that fancy SUV of his. I just feel awful for them. Did you know?" "Nyan, Gonoran." I took a slow sip of my tea. I looked around my little house, the house Frank built, the house that had always been enough for us. I felt a pang, but it wasn't of guilt or regret. It was a faint, ghostly echo of a mother's sadness for a child's poor choices. It was the sadness you feel for a stranger. "Yes, Mary," I said, my voice calm and even. "I had heard something about that. I do hope they'll be all right." And that was the truth. I did hope she would be all right. I hoped that losing everything she thought was important would finally force her to see what actually was. I hoped in some small, distant part of my heart that she would learn to stand on her own 2 feet and build a life based on something more than granite countertops and luxury cars. But it was no longer my concern. Her life, her choices, her struggles, they were her own now. I had finally, truly let her go. The consequences for her were clear. She lost the house, the car, the lifestyle she had valued more than her own mother. The consequence for me? I found peace, and I found freedom. And in the quiet, I began to rebuild. I started living again, not as a grieving widow or a forgotten mother, but as Beatrice. I reconnected with my sister, telling her a part of the truth, enough for her to understand. I started having lunch with my friends again. I began volunteering at the animal shelter. The first time I walked in, they had a new plaque on the wall. It read, "This new wing made possible by a generous anonymous donation in loving memory of Franklin Miller." Seeing his name there, associated with so much warmth and hope, the barking of happy dogs all around me, tears came to my eyes. But for the first time in years, they were tears of joy. I was turning his legacy, our secret, into tangible good. The money that had been a curse, a source of such profound pain, was now helping to heal, to build, to comfort. I hadn't destroyed an inheritance. I had transformed it. It was no longer a lump of cash waiting for a death. It was 100 scholarships, 1,000 adopted pets, 1,000,000 moments of comfort for sick children. It was alive. I learned the hardest lesson a mother can ever learn, that sometimes the greatest act of love is to let go. You cannot force your children to share your values. You cannot make them good people. You can only show them the way, and then you have to trust that the seeds you planted will grow. And if they don't, if they choose a path of greed and selfishness, you cannot let them drag you down into the darkness with them. Your life is your own. Your peace is your own. Your worth is your own. For so long, I thought my worth was tied to being a mother, to being needed by my daughter. When she told me I was useless, a part of me believed her. But I was wrong. My worth was never hers to define. It was built with my own 2 hands, right alongside my husband. It was in the love we shared, the simple, honest life we built, and in the strength I finally found to choose my own peace over her poison. So if you are out there, if you are listening to my story, and you feel that your love is being treated like a commodity, something to be used up and discarded, please listen to this old woman. You are not an ATM. You are not a stepping stone. You are not an obstacle on someone else's path. You are a destination, all by yourself. Your heart is not a resource to be plundered. It is a treasure to be cherished. And you must be the first one to cherish it. You must be the one to protect it. Build a wall around it if you have to, not of stone, but of self-respect. And know that true wealth is not what you can give to others. It's the peace you build inside yourself. Thank you for letting me share my story with you. It feels good to finally let the light in. If you have listened this far, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the little notification bell. It helps our stories find the people who need to hear them most. And if you have a story of your own, about a time you had to choose your own peace, please share it in the comments. Your stories are a powerful reminder that none of us are alone in our struggles. Love you all. This is Grandma Beatrice, and I'll see you in the next story.